The autumn rain drummed against the windows of our small apartment in Brooklyn as I stared at the formal invitation in my hands. Gold-embossed letters spelled out the Henderson family cordially invites you to Thanksgiving dinner in elegant script. My wife Sarah looked up from her laptop, her green eyes catching the warm glow of our desk lamp. They actually sent a formal invitation, she asked, setting down her coffee mug with a soft clink. Your parents don't do anything halfway, I replied, running my fingers through my dark hair. At 28, I'd been married to Sarah for 2 years, but I still felt like an outsider looking in on the Henderson family's world of corporate achievements and country club memberships. Sarah's father, Robert Henderson, was a senior partner at a prestigious law firm in Manhattan. Her mother, Patricia, served on the boards of 3 different charities while managing their sprawling estate in Westchester County. Sarah herself had followed the family tradition, working as a marketing director for a Fortune 500 company. Then there was me, Marcus Chen, the freelance graphic designer, who worked from our converted bedroom office. You know they mean well, Sarah said, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. They just ... they don't understand what you do. I walked to the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked glass. The truth was, I'd built something remarkable over the past 3 years. My client list included some of the biggest names in tech, entertainment, and publishing. But to the Hendersons, I was just the freelancer who didn't wear a suit to work or have a corner office with a view. Remember last Christmas, I asked, turning back to Sarah. Your dad introduced me to his golf buddies as Sarah's husband who does computer stuff. Sarah winced. Marcus. To him, a real job means showing up to an office every day. The next morning, I found myself in my usual spot at Corner Grind, a coffee shop in Park Slope where I often worked when I needed a change of scenery. The familiar sounds of the espresso machine and quiet conversations created a comfortable backdrop as I reviewed my latest project, complete brand identity for an emerging tech startup. My phone buzzed with a text from David Park, my best friend. Since college and now a successful architect, heard you're facing the Henderson firing squad again for Thanksgiving. Want to grab lunch and strategize? An hour later, we sat across from each other at a small Italian place in the village. David, always impeccably dressed in his tailored suits, listened intently as I explained my dilemma. Man, you're letting them get in your head, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. You made more money last year than most people with traditional jobs. You've got clients begging for your work. Why do you let them make you feel small? Not that simple, I replied, pushing my food around my plate. Sarah loves her family. I don't want to be the source of tension between them. But you can't keep pretending you're less successful than you are, just to make them comfortable, David countered. Maybe it's time they learned what you actually do. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing contracts and invoices from the past year. The numbers were impressive. I'd nearly doubled my income from the previous year. My client roster included a major streaming platform, 2 best-selling authors, and a luxury hotel chain. But somehow, none of that felt real when I was sitting at the Henderson dining table. Feeling like I needed to justify my existence, Sarah appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Penny, for your thoughts. Just thinking about Thursday, I admitted. Your cousin Brad will be there, right? The one who just made partner at his accounting firm? Marcus, Sarah said softly, entering the room and placing her hands on my shoulders. I know my family can be ... intense. But you don't have to prove anything to them, don't I? I asked, looking up at her. Every family gathering feels like a performance where I'm the only one who doesn't know the script. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You know what? Maybe it's time they learned the script. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I found myself at my favorite menswear store in Soho, something I rarely did. The salesman, a well-dressed man in his 50s, helped me select a navy blazer and matching trousers, not quite a suit, but elevated enough to show I'd made an effort. Special occasion? He asked as he marked the pants for hemming. Meeting the in-laws, I replied, examining myself in the 3-way mirror. I looked different, more polished, but still recognizably myself. Ah, the age-old battle, he chuckled. My advice? Be yourself, but be the best version of yourself. While waiting for the alterations, I walked through the city, observing the pre-holiday energy. Street vendors sold roasted chestnuts, and early Christmas decorations were already appearing in shop windows. The crisp November air helped clear my head, and I found myself thinking about what David had said. That afternoon, I organized my portfolio in a way I'd never done before. Instead of just showing the visual work, I documented the stories behind each project, the challenges, the solutions, the impact. My redesign of the streaming platform's user interface had increased user engagement by 30%. The book covers I'd created had helped launch 2 novels onto bestseller lists. The hotel chain's rebrand had resulted in a 25% increase in bookings. Sarah found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed materials and my laptop. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down groceries for the pie we were bringing to dinner. "Just organizing some work samples," I said, not looking up from the screen. "I realized I've never actually shown your family what I do." She sat down beside me, studying the materials. "Marcus, these are incredible. I mean, I knew you were talented, but seeing it all laid out like this..." She picked up a case study about a nonprofit I'd helped rebrand. This campaign raised $2 million for homeless services. "The visual identity was just part of it," I said, feeling a familiar warmth when talking about work I was proud of. "But yeah, good design can change how people perceive and interact with a cause." "My parents have no idea," Sarah said quietly. "That's kind of the point," I replied. "They see Freelancer and think unstable. They don't see the strategy, the client relationships, the business development. To them, I'm just playing on the computer." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I think I've been part of the problem. I've been so focused on keeping the peace that I've never really advocated for you." "You don't need to defend me, Sarah." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "You're my husband. Your success is our success. And honestly, I'm proud of what you've built. I should have been saying that all along." That evening, I called my own parents in San Francisco. My father, a software engineer, and my mother, a teacher, had always been supportive of my unconventional path. "Marcus, you sound tense," my mother observed. "Everything okay?" I explained the situation, and both parents listened without judgment. My father said, "When I started in tech 30 years ago, people thought computers were just toys. Now look at the world. Sometimes it takes people time to understand new ways of working. But you shouldn't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable," my mother added. "Your work speaks for itself." After hanging up, I felt a new resolve. I'd spent 2 years trying to fit into the Henderson family's definition of success. Instead of showing them what success looked like for me, the next morning, Thanksgiving Day, I woke up before dawn. The apartment was quiet, with only the distant sounds of the city beginning to stir. Made coffee and sat at my desk, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline as the sun painted the buildings in shades of gold and amber. My phone buzzed with messages from clients. Even on Thanksgiving, ideas and opportunities didn't stop flowing. A film director wanted to discuss poster concepts for his new project. A restaurant chain was interested in a complete brand overhaul. A tech startup founder had sent a lengthy email about their vision for disrupting the healthcare industry. I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped seeing these messages as validations of my success. Instead, I'd internalized the Henderson family's skepticism. Questioning whether what I did was real work, Sarah emerged from the bedroom. Already dressed in an elegant burgundy dress that complemented her auburn hair. "You're up early," she said, kissing my cheek. "Ready for today?" "I think so," I replied, standing and adjusting my new blazer. "Actually, I know so." The Henderson estate sat on 3 acres in Scarsdale, a Tudor-style mansion that had been in the family for 2 generations. As our Uber pulled up the circular driveway, I noticed the perfectly manicured lawn and the tasteful fall decorations adorning the entrance. "Remember," Sarah said, squeezing my hand, "they love you. Just don't understand you yet." Prisha Henderson answered the door, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in a perfect bob, and her smile was warm but formal. "Marcus, dear, you look lovely," she said, air kissing my cheek. "Is that a new blazer?" Yes, ma'am, I replied, handing her the apple pie Sarah had baked.
Thank you for having
Me. The living room was filled with family members I'd met at previous gatherings. Sarah's brother Tom, an investment banker, was discussing market trends with their uncle. Brad, the cousin who'd recently made partner, was showing off photos of his new Mercedes to anyone who'd listen. The children played quietly in the corner, supervised by their mothers who discussed private school admissions and summer camp options. Robert Henderson emerged from his study. An imposing man in his early 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. He'd built his law firm from the ground up and had the kind of presence that made people stand a little straighter when he entered a room. "Marcus," said, extending his hand for a firm handshake.
Good to see.
How's the computer work going?" "It's going well, thank you," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "Business has been very strong this year." "That's nice," Patricia said, appearing beside her husband. "It must be so freeing to work from home. No office politics, no real pressure." Sarah shot me a warning look, but I felt something shift inside me. The condescension in her tone. The assumption that my work was somehow less legitimate because it didn't conform to their traditional model. It crystallized everything I'd been feeling. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice level, "there's quite a bit of pressure. When you're running your own business, every decision impacts your livelihood directly." "Oh, of course," Robert said, though his tone suggested he didn't quite believe me. "But it's not the same as having real responsibilities, real deadlines, real consequences." The conversation continued through cocktail hour, with various family members making subtle comments about the freedom of freelance work, the flexibility of not having a boss, and the creativity of not being bound by corporate structure. Each comment felt like a small cut, delivered with smiles and wrapped in apparent compliments. During dinner, seated at the massive dining room table beneath a crystal chandelier, the conversation turned to career achievements. Tom discussed his latest acquisition deal. Brad talked about the high-profile audit that had earned him recognition at his firm. Sarah mentioned her team's successful product launch. And Marcus, Robert said, cutting into his turkey, still doing the graphic design thing. "Yes, sir," I replied, setting down my fork. "Although it's evolved quite a bit beyond basic design work." "Oh?" Patricia asked, her tone politely interested but dismissive. "What do you mean?" This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I felt Sarah's hand brush mine under the tabula gesture of support. "Well, I've been fortunate to work with some interesting clients," I began. "The work is expanded into brand strategy, user experience design, and digital marketing integration." "That sounds very modern," Robert said, the word modern carrying the weight of someone who viewed change with suspicion. "It is," I agreed. "The industry has changed dramatically in the past few years. Companies are realizing that good design isn't just about making things look pretty, it's about solving problems and driving business results." Brad leaned forward, his voice carrying a note of challenge. "But it's not like you're working for real companies, right? I mean, no offense, but most freelancers work for small businesses, startups, that kind of thing." "Some of my clients are startups," I said carefully. "But I've also worked with some larger organizations." "Like what?" Tom asked, his tone suggesting. He expected me to name some local pizza shop or dry cleaner. I looked around the table, seeing the polite but skeptical faces of people who'd already decided what my success looked like. Sarah gave me an almost imperceptible nod. "Well," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket for my phone, "let me show you a few examples." The dining room fell silent as I pulled up my portfolio on my phone. The only sounds were the soft clink of silverware and the distant hum of the kitchen where the staff prepared dessert. "This is probably easier to show than explain," I said, standing and moving to where everyone could see my screen. "This is a project I completed last month for Meridian." "Streaming." Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. Even he knew Meridianite was one of the fastest-growing streaming platforms in the country, competing directly with Netflix and Hulu. "They hired me to redesign their user interface," I continued, swiping through before and after images. Old design was causing user frustration and high abandonment rates. My redesign improved user engagement by 30% and reduced customer service complaints by 45%. The room was unusually quiet. I could see Patricia trying to process this information, her assumptions about my work beginning to crumble. But that's not all, I said, warming to the subject. They were so pleased with the results that they've retained me as their primary UX consultant. It's a 6-figure annual contract. Tom's fork paused halfway to his mouth. 6 figures? For design work? For strategic design consulting, I corrected. But yes, it's become quite lucrative. I moved to the next project. This is work I did for HarperCollins, the publishing house. They brought me in to redesign book covers for their literary fiction line. The new designs helped push 2 novels onto the New York Times bestseller list. Sarah was smiling now, seeing her family's faces as they realized the scope of my work. And this, I said, showing them a sleek hotel website, is the complete rebrand I did for the Lux Hotel Group. 23 properties across the country. The new brand identity and website design resulted in a 25% increase in direct bookings, which saved him millions in third-party booking fees. How much do you charge for something like that? Brad asked, his previous condescension replaced by genuine curiosity. That particular project was $250,000, I replied, plus ongoing retainer fees for brand maintenance and new property launches. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the polite, dismissive quiet of people humoring someone they didn't take seriously. It was the silence of people recalibrating their entire understanding of a situation. Robert cleared his throat. Marcus, of your work was so extensive, most people don't, I said, sitting back down. There's a common misconception that freelance work is somehow less serious or less profitable than traditional employment. But the truth is, when you're good at what you do and you understand how to run a business, the opportunities are enormous. But don't you worry about job security? Patricia asked. I mean without a steady paycheck. I understand the concern, I replied. But I actually have more job security than most people. I'm not dependent on one employer or one industry. My income comes from multiple sources, and I have contracts extending into next year. If one client relationship ends, I have others to fall back on. Sarah spoke up for the first time in the conversation. Marcus made more money last year than I did, and I'm a director at a Fortune 500 company. The admission hung in the air. I could see the family members processing this information, their worldview shifting in real time. But how do you find these clients? Tom asked. I mean, companies like Meridian, they must have huge marketing budgets. How do you compete with big agencies? Sometimes I do compete with big agencies, I said. But often, I win because I can offer something they can't: personalize attention, faster turnaround times, and lower overhead costs. A project that might cost them $500,000 from a major agency, I can deliver for a quarter of that price while still maintaining quality. Plus, I added, I've built a reputation in the industry. Most of my new clients come from referrals. When HarperCollins was happy with my work, they recommended me to other publishers. When Meridian saw results, they introduced me to other tech companies. The conversation continued for another hour, but the dynamic had completely shifted. Instead of polite questions about my computer work, the family was genuinely interested in understanding my business model, my growth strategies, and my future plans. Brad, who had been the most skeptical, was now asking about the possibility of me doing some design work for his accounting firm. Tom wanted to know if I'd ever considered working with financial services companies. Even Robert was inquiring about the legal aspects of my contracts and intellectual property rights. You know, Robert said as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, I owe you an apology, Marcus. I've been thinking about your work in very outdated terms. No apology necessary, I replied, though I appreciated the acknowledgement. The business world is changing rapidly. Remote work, freelance professionals, digital services. It's all becoming more mainstream.
But
You're not just riding a trend, Patricia observed. You've built something substantial. I've been fortunate, I said. But yes, it's taken years to build the reputation and client base I have now. It wasn't handed to me. I had to prove myself with every project. Later, as Sarah and I sat in the Uber heading back to Brooklyn, She turned to me with a look of admiration I hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm sorry I let them make you feel small. I'm sorry I didn't defend you better." "You don't need to apologize," I replied, taking her hand. "I needed to learn how to advocate for myself." "But I should have been doing it all along," she insisted. "You've built something amazing, Marcus. You've created a business that gives us financial security and you the freedom to do work you love. That's not just success, that's the American dream." As the city lights blurred past the window, I reflected on how the evening had unfolded. I hadn't set out to prove anything to the Henderson family, but somehow, by simply being honest about my work and my success, I'd changed their entire perception of what I do. The next morning, I woke up to several text messages. One from Robert, asking if I'd be interested in doing some design work for his law firm. Another from Tom, wondering if I'd like to meet for lunch to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Even Patricia had sent a message, asking for my opinion on rebranding one of her charity organizations. But the message that meant the most came from Sarah. "I'm proud to be married to such a successful entrepreneur. Love you." I realized that the evening had been about more than just correcting misconceptions about freelance work. It had been about recognizing the value of what I'd built and refusing to diminish it to make others comfortable. Success doesn't always look like corner offices and company cars. Sometimes it looks like the freedom to choose your clients, the flexibility to work from anywhere, and the satisfaction of building something entirely your own. As I sat at my desk that morning, responding to emails from potential new clients, I felt a sense of validation that had nothing to do with the Henderson family's approval. I'd built a business that provided value to my clients, security for my family, and fulfillment for myself. That was success by any measure, and I'd never let anyone convince me otherwise again. The phone rang. Another potential client referred by Meridian. As I answered, I smiled, knowing that the work I'd done to establish myself was paying dividends in ways I'd never expected. The conversation with my in-laws had been just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the relationship with Sarah's family underwent a remarkable transformation. Robert called me personally to discuss redesigning his law firm's website, explaining that their current site looked dated and uninspiring. During our meeting at his Manhattan office, he treated me with the same professional respect he showed his legal colleagues. "Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, overlooking the city. "I realize I've been operating under some very outdated assumptions about how business works in the 21st century." "It's a common misconception," I replied, opening my laptop to show him preliminary concepts. "The business world has changed dramatically, but people's perceptions haven't always caught up." "You're right," he admitted. "When I started practicing law 40 years ago, success meant a corner office, a secretary, and a parking space. But you've built something that's arguably more valuable: complete autonomy and multiple revenue streams." The website project for Robert's firm became one of my most satisfying assignments. Not only did it pay exceptionally well, but it also gave me the opportunity to work closely with someone who'd initially dismissed my profession. As we collaborated over the following months, I watched Robert's respect for my expertise grow with each iteration of the design. He said during one of our review sessions, "I've been recommending you to my colleagues. The legal industry is notoriously conservative, but even we're starting to realize that good design can be a competitive advantage." True to his word, Robert's referrals led to 3 more law firm projects, each more lucrative than the last. The legal industry, once I understood its unique needs and challenges, became one of my most profitable niches. Patricia's transformation was perhaps even more dramatic. She invited me to lunch at her country club, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. As we sat on the terrace overlooking the golf course, she explained her vision for rebranding her primary charity, an organization focused on literacy programs for underprivileged children. "The current materials look like they were designed in the 1990s, she said, showing me their outdated brochures and website. We're struggling to connect with younger donors who might be more generous if we appeared more professional and contemporary. It's not just about looking modern, I explained, reviewing their materials. It's about storytelling. People donate to causes they can emotionally connect with. Your organization is doing incredible work, but your branding doesn't convey the impact you're having. The charity rebrand became a pro bono project that I was genuinely passionate about. Working with Patricia, I developed a comprehensive brand identity that told the story of individual children whose lives had been changed by literacy programs. The new materials featured professional photography, compelling infographics, and a cohesive visual system that made the organization's impact tangible and immediate. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 6 months of launching the new brand, the charity saw a 40% increase in donations and successfully recruited 12 new board members. Patricia was so pleased that she recommended me to 2 other charitable organizations, both of which became paying clients. "Marcus," she said, during one of our final meetings, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an acknowledgement that you've changed how I think about professionalism and success." Tom's interest in my work led to an unexpected opportunity in the financial sector. His investment firm was launching a new fund focused on technology startups. They needed marketing materials that would appeal to both institutional investors and high-net-worth individuals. "The challenge," Tom explained over lunch in the financial district, "is that most of our traditional marketing materials are incredibly boring. Charts, graphs, performance data, all necessary but not particularly engaging." "But that's exactly what good design can solve," I replied. "You can present the same information in a way that's both professional and compelling. It's about making complex data accessible and trustworthy." The investment fund project pushed me into new territory. I had to learn about SEC regulations, compliance requirements, and the conservative aesthetic preferences of institutional investors. But I also had to make the materials engaging enough to capture attention in a crowded marketplace. The final product was a series of marketing materials that maintained the gravitas expected in financial services while incorporating modern design principles. The fund's marketing director later told Tom that the materials had been instrumental in securing several major investments. "You've opened my eyes to something I never considered," Tom said, when we met to celebrate the successful fund launch. "Design isn't just about making things look pretty, it's about communication, persuasion, and building trust." Even Brad, who'd been the most skeptical family member, eventually became a client. His accounting firm was expanding into tax preparation services for high-net-worth individuals. They needed marketing materials that would differentiate them from larger firms. "I'll be honest," Brad said when he called to discuss the project, "I was completely wrong about what you do. I thought freelancing was just a nice word for being unemployed." "It's a common misconception," I replied, though I appreciated his honesty. "The truth is, freelancing at this level is really entrepreneurship. I'm running a business just like you are." The project with Brad's firm was particularly rewarding because it allowed me to work with someone who'd gone from skeptic to advocate. As we developed the marketing strategy, I could see him gaining a deeper appreciation for the strategic thinking that goes into effective design. "You know what's funny?" Brad said during one of our brainstorming sessions. "I used to think that anyone with a computer could do design work. Now I realize it's like saying anyone with a calculator can do accounting. A tool is just the beginning." 6 months after that pivotal Thanksgiving dinner, I found myself in an unexpected position. Not only had I gained the respect of Sarah's family, but I'd also expanded my business significantly through their referrals. The legal, financial, and nonprofit sectors had become major sources of revenue. My annual income had increased by nearly 60%. Sarah and I were having dinner at our favorite restaurant in Brooklyn, celebrating the 1-year anniversary of my biggest client contract, when she brought up an observation that had been on her mind. "You know what I've noticed?" she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "You're more confident now, not just about your work, but about everything." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I had a sense of what she was getting at. "Before, you always seemed to be apologizing for it, your success, minimizing what you'd accomplished. Now you talk about your work with the pride it deserves." She was right. Something had shifted that night at the Henderson table. By refusing to diminish my achievements to make others comfortable, I'd not only changed their perception of me, I'd changed my perception of myself. I think I was letting their doubts become my doubts, I admitted. When people you respect don't understand what you do, it's easy to start questioning whether it's legitimate. But now, Sarah asked. Now I know it's not my job to make others comfortable with my success, I replied. It's my job to do good work, serve my clients well, and build something I'm proud of. The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a potential client who'd been referred by one of Robert's law firm colleagues. They were interested in discussing a complete rebrand for their boutique investment firm. Another referral from your dad's network, I told Sarah, showing her the message. He's been telling everyone about you, she said, smiling. Last week he told me that recommending you to his colleagues has been one of his best business decisions. Apparently the website you designed for his firm has generated more client inquiries than any other marketing initiative they've tried. That evening, as I worked in my home office, responding to emails and reviewing contracts, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The same work that had once been dismissed as computer stuff was now generating more income and recognition than I'd ever imagined possible. But more importantly, I'd learned something valuable about self-advocacy and professional respect. Success doesn't always look like what previous generations expect, and it's not my responsibility to conform to others' narrow definitions of professional achievement. The phone rang again. This time it was David, my architect friend who'd encouraged me to stand up for myself months earlier. I heard through the grapevine that you're killing it with the Henderson family referrals, he said. How does it feel to be the golden boy? It feels like validation, I replied. But more than that, it feels like I finally understand my own worth. That's the real victory, David said. Not that they finally respect you, but that you finally respect yourself enough to demand it. As I hung up the phone and returned to my work, I realized that the young man who'd sat nervously at that Thanksgiving table, trying to make himself smaller to fit in, was gone. In his place was a confident professional who understood the value of his expertise and wasn't afraid to claim the success he'd earned. The story that had begun with condescending comments about computer work had evolved into something much more significant, a lesson about professional respect, family dynamics, and the courage to advocate for yourself in a world that doesn't always understand the path you've chosen.